A little while ago, and to be honest, I'm not entirely sure how I even found it, I came across this blog post entitled Basing My Life on Scenes from Children's Books by Jo, who describes herself as writer, gardener, and idler, woman after my own heart. A huge part of the inspiration for this particular blog post was the Bramley Hedge books by Jill Barklam, and it got me thinking about how children's books used to feel. You know, the Beatrix Potters, the classic Paddington Bear books, the Adventures of Tintin, Wind in the Willows, Winnie the Pooh, Rupert Bear, Millie, Molly and Mandy. And yes, I have noticed an overarching theme here, animals living in dens designed like our grandmother's living room. Not that I'm doing down the children's books of today, like the classics of Fart Book or My Big Fat Smelly Poo Diary or Little Monkey's Big Peeing Circus. But in all seriousness, there are still plenty of beautiful children's stories to enjoy, but not half as many that seem to capture that aesthetically cluttered, lived-in coziness that we used to see so very much. It's the same quaintness that I get when I watch old Disney films like Lady and the Tramp or 101 Dalmatians, the whimsical charm of Studio Ghibli, or that warm hug feeling of sitting down to watch Wallace and Gromit. All on the backdrop of quite nooky and yet still vibrant homes. And yet today, a lot of spaces seem to prioritise neatness, efficiency, and clean, whereas these examples, as Jo expresses, are art. Jo, like me, says that she doesn't actually mind a good dollop of healthy disorder, and she calls it good mess, which is something that I really, really like. A space that reflects all the little idiosyncrasies of being human. But these days, mess is considered unproductive, and I do agree that some is. I mean, I don't want to live my life like an actual hoarder, keeping every manual and box and receipt as my grandparents used to. Although, with all the retro tech that I now use, those manuals did end up being a literal godsend. Exhibit A. The computer, not Winnie the Pooh. I enjoy things having their place. Honestly, I do. And I do not want to be someone that jam-packs their home to the point where there is no space for calm or serenity. But I will also not do away with my shelf of old books, slotted snugly into my mahogany dresser, simply because a Kindle can hold them all digitally. I mean, in the pursuit of a more analogue lifestyle, of course I'm going to have more things, physically, rather than a modern, convenience-based product that could replace an older item and does about 6 things in one. And yes, I guess that does make me a maximalist. But what it doesn't make me is materialistic, because this lifestyle that I'm trying to achieve also brandishes things like sustainability, skill set, craftsmanship, frugality, and the art of doing. Clutter is not bad, and minimalism isn't the answer. Although not a bad thing in and of itself, that is not the saint, and clutter is not the demon. And I also want to make clear that I am not demonizing anybody that embraces minimalism and rejects clutter. My inner joy comes from my home's overall aesthetic appeal. The mismatched rugs, piled up mason bowls, and half-started projects literally everywhere you look. Imperfections tickle me, like my worn stair carpet, where whenever I look at it, I picture me or my mum dashing up and down the stairs to get ready before we pop out. And you know what? I can live with a wonky hot tap, and actually, I find it strangely charming. In our bathroom, for example, we recently added some lino flooring, just literally popped it right over the tiles that are white or an off-white. And this linoleum is actually from the 1940s, and we also added these cute little yellow valance curtains, which all in all would be a nightmare for some, but a smile inducer for us. And you know what's really great? Is that it was organic. You know, we came across this old lino in the bottom of my grandparents' wardrobes, and they'd likely been there since the house was first built. And it's finding these little secondhand gems when you're not really sure what you're going to find that adds a bit more variety to my home. A vision that might seem a little bit all over the place at first, but one that does eventually kind of cobble together thanks to my mind's eye. which is something actually that me and Diane recently talked about in our last video together. Another example, okay? Look at these curtains, right? These are probably from around the 1930s, and we salvaged them from our church because, and brace yourselves, they were going to be thrown out. It's pure sacrilege. And in a church. So we brought them home and we repaired them where they started to fray slightly on the bottom. And now, as you can see, I've got my curtains, I've got my chair cover, and there's also one of the curtains, but a bit smaller, covering my kind of games consoles just to keep all of that hidden. And, you know, yes, these all match. They all match each other. But they don't match the rugs on my floor, or my wallpaper, or my patchwork quilt. And that's fine, for me, personally, because, again, these were a kind of organic, in my mind, meant to be find. And I guess one thing that I can say for myself is there does seem to be an overall reddish tone to my room. But remember that thing I said about the mind's eye? Eventually, it all comes together in a kind of affinity. I don't really know how, but it does. And I think these do. I much prefer them to my old curtains that weren't patterned. I'm a pattern clasher, okay? It's just who I am. Muddled glory, as Joe calls it. And I think that's the appeal of these old children's books, because their pages were a feast for the eyes, filled with colour and hard-working spaces and small itty-bitty tiny details rather than order. Like the little homemade nest that my pigeons attempt to make. Far from perfect, but individual and functional, even if they do make them by ripping apart the waterproof tablecloth that their food sits on. Honestly, the amount of tablecloths that I've gone through for that one single aviary. And of course, it's always important to find balance. I mean, if you challenge me, no, scratch that. My mum. If you challenge my mum to find that little pincushion lady that we bought at a charity shop 2 years ago, she'd know exactly where to look. Although that might be just a mum thing. But the point is, we take ownership of the clutter that you see before you. And we keep our fingers on the pulse of how much our home can hold, what we can do without and donate, and where everything actually is. We're not perfect, okay? Far from it. Especially as someone who loves nothing more than spending an afternoon doing a good old charity shop rummage. It's really hard not to come home with every single kitsch little item that for some reason speaks to me. But we do try our best to be conscious purchasers. But this is the part where this blog really struck me, and unable to word it any better, I shall simply quote it. We live in a world where the acquisition of things is disastrously easy, and naturally there has been a backlash against this physical clutter by making things the enemy to be gotten rid of completely in order to be spiritually pure. But things aren't the enemy. The means of production of things is the enemy. We can have things and make them and use tools to make them and create beauty all around us if we do it slowly, carefully, thoughtfully, and on a small scale. Doing a Ross Geller thing there. We can turn our houses back into hubs of creativity instead of being black holes of consumption. Love it, love all of that. I suppose it all boils down to how we use our homes and how we exist in them. For example, recently on my Gold membership, my colleague Miriam wrote a fantastic blog about time travelling to dial back the chaos. And in it, she commented that households used to operate under a much slower rhythm, whether that be cooking from scratch or hand laundering your clothes or mending things. And yes, these tasks were much more time consuming, but also more structured. There were fewer quick things to be getting on with. Your days had to be structured and full of routine, and so this likely reduced the cognitive load. And I quote, "Today, quick meals, ultra-processed food, and convenience doesn't actually give us back more time. It enables us to get more shoehorned into our day, whilst also presenting us with far more choices to make minute by minute, adding to our sense of decision fatigue." Decision fatigue. Now, that is something that I think, looking back, I've suffered with since my late teens. I mean, I think in today's day and age, it's hard not to suffer from decision fatigue because everything is so labour-saving that you need to make decisions on what else you're going to do with your time pretty much all of the time. And as a creative person that needs to make a lot of artistic decisions, the fatigue is real. Fellow creatives, I hear you, I see you, your struggles are valid. Let alone people with families and children. Imagine all the decisions you have to make on a daily basis. And I think that the idea of clutter might create that kind of exhausting picture. But actually, I believe that modern efficiency can do the same thing, but in a different way. Because now that you have a washing machine, you've suddenly got all of this extra time. So what are you going to do with it? I can't, there's too much choice. Where do I start? And Joe backs up this point by saying that clutter and minimalism are actually two sides of the same coin. Minimalism is a rejection of the crazy consumption of modern life, but it doesn't offer a new way of living, just less consumption. So yes, perhaps the answer really does lie in how we use our homes. I mean, let's face it, Grandma's house was a workshop, not an exhibition space. And I'm paraphrasing Joe again there. But what a great little analogy. You know, my home is not a show home, it's a lived-in home. It's a work in progress. I'm a work in progress, and my home reflects that. I mean, look at Pooh Bear. Every morning he's doing those morning stretches, trying to stave off that honey, but he never quite gets there because he too is a work in progress.
I am short, fat, and proud of that.
Pooh Bear out here promoting body positivity. And yes, I may have sang that song to myself a few times when looking in the mirror. I too get rumblies in my tumblies. Please tell me if anybody else relates with Joe and I, who I don't know. I don't actually know Joe, but I feel like I know her after reading this blog, because the idea of living in something that echoes those beautiful old children's illustrations, it makes my heart sing. Does anybody get that? Does anybody want that? Do you understand where I'm coming from? I guess the most modern example of this aesthetic that I'm talking about is probably cottagecore. You know, the idea of foliage and toadstools and little critters wearing waistcoats. You know, that entire picture that you see in your mind's eye when you think of cottagecore. I think that is the most modern day equivalent, and it's why it's one of the nostalgic driven aesthetics that I am drawn to, because when I see people embracing a cottagecore lifestyle through their fashion or their activities within the home or the landscape of where their house is and things like that, you know, if you really are living the dream, it does take me back to pages of old children's books, and that's why it goes under that nostalgic umbrella. And obviously cottagecore is very heavily associated with fashion, you know, with the frilly collars and picnic baskets and straw hats and linen aprons. But in this particular mini essay, I'm talking more about how that can sort of disseminate into your home life and your lifestyle in general, rather than just dressing the part. How can you almost live the part and find that that can actually be rather fulfilling? Living in our homes becomes a story of what we make in them, whether that be memories or jam. And our lives are beautifully imperfect, and that's what makes them so enamoring. And that's why I'm so enamored by these old, I guess, vintage children's books, these illustrations where you can see the pencil lines, you know, you can see the story, not just of the characters, but of the illustrator themselves, if that makes sense. Fingerprints in Aardman, you know, that's what I want to see. And I don't want to go into too much detail on this, but it's likely why people like you and I can't really get fully on board with AI. Because AI does not possess that craftsmanship and handmade quality. You know, it's too synthetic. Well, I mean, not all of it, because AI be out there tricking me on the daily. Like, I'm increasingly struggling to tell what is AI and what isn't. And I'm not saying AI is inherently evil. I mean, there is one creator who makes these adorable little felt figures, but then they used AI to animate them, and this had the internet utterly divided. And I think it's because people felt a bit cheated, because they already had something that was so lovely in its own right and so homemade and really told the story of the creator themselves, that to just animate it in such a smooth and lucid way probably felt a little bit jarring. But the creator did say that they can't animate, but they still wanted to bring their little critters to life. So AI was obviously the easiest option. And that's the thing, isn't it? AI is easy. I mean, for example, someone like me could quite easily go onto an AI generator and generate a Studio Ghibli-esque image in a matter of seconds. But that kind of takes away the entire skill of bringing worlds like that to life. It's like my membership. So as a kind of side quest for this video, I said to Jack, can he draw me, because he's a very talented drawer, illustrator, artist, can he draw me a sort of children's book, animals wearing clothes scene, but my way? And he said to me, oh, but wouldn't it be better if you used AI? No, because AI isn't the love of my life, bringing my imagination to life. He is. And so him drawing this beautiful scene with all of his mistakes and eraser marks, I mean, that's what made it so great. And it came out so good, by the way. And one more thing about my membership, and I'll stop banging on about it, I promise. If you are a gold member and you've commented the password below, I will be keeping my eye out for it. And I am not saying that very zen, calm, clean, open, structured spaces are void of personality or art. On the contrary, these spaces carry their own weight, their own expression that's different to the things that I resonate with, but can still be beautiful in its own right. What I am saying is that mess is not something that should be punished, and imperfection is not something that should induce shame, because all of our existence is a journey. It's not a perfectly polished destination. I mean, how boring would it be if it was? Do you really think that the little mice from Bramley Hedge felt inadequate because all of their produce wasn't perfectly ordered in little labelled jars? No. So go easy on yourself. Better yet, embrace the chaos. Life's tapestry wasn't woven in a day. And like these beautiful children's illustrations, I'm sure that they weren't perfect the very first time.